Victoria Chen Williams stood in her big apartment in New York City, holding a beautiful wedding invitation in her shaking hands. The invitation was from her husband Marcus's family, the rich and powerful Williams family. Marcus's cousin Bradley was getting married to a woman named Sophia Vanderbilt, and everyone said it would be the biggest wedding of the year. Victoria had been married to Marcus for 3 years now, but his family never really accepted her. Victoria was not poor herself. Her parents were successful business people who came from China to America, and Victoria had built her own company that made clothes. Her company was worth $1 billion. But Marcus's family still treated her badly. They made mean comments about where she came from. They asked rude questions about her work, and they often did not invite her to family events. What made things worse was that Victoria had been hearing bad stories. Marcus's Aunt Patricia had been telling people that Victoria only married Marcus because he had money. Patricia said Victoria was using him, and that she was not like them. The worst moment came when Victoria heard Patricia talking on the phone. Patricia said she hired extra security guards for the wedding to watch certain guests who might steal things. Marcus became very angry when Victoria told him what she heard. He wanted to go and yell at his family right away, but Victoria stopped him. Instead, she got a crazy idea. She would go to the wedding, but not as Victoria Chen Williams, the rich businesswoman and Marcus's wife. She would pretend to be a worker. She would dress up as one of the black women serving food at the wedding. This way, she could see how the Williams family really acted when they thought nobody important was watching. Marcus did not like this idea at first. He was worried about what might happen, but he knew his family had problems with racism and thinking they were better than other people. Finally, he agreed to help. Marcus would go to the wedding alone. He would tell everyone that Victoria was too busy with work to come, while Marcus was there. Victoria would be working as a server, watching everything and listening to what people said. Victoria called her friend Denise, who owned a catering company. She told Denise about her plan. Denise was very surprised at first, but then she thought it was interesting. She agreed to hire Victoria as a temporary worker for the wedding. Victoria would work with Denise's regular team, carrying food trays and cleaning tables. Nobody would know who she really was. The week before the wedding, Victoria got ready for her role. She practiced walking like a server and talking in a different way. She bought cheap work clothes from a second-hand store. She took off all her expensive jewelry and her wedding ring and locked them away in a safe place. When she looked at herself in the mirror the day before the wedding, Victoria almost did not recognize herself. She looked like a completely different person. Marcus held her close the night before the wedding. He was worried about what she might see and hear. "Are you really sure you want to do this?" he asked her. Victoria nodded her head. "I need to know the truth," she said. "I need to see who your family really is when they think nobody is judging them." She knew that what she would discover at the wedding would change everything forever. The plan was simple, but dangerous. Victoria would arrive early in the morning with the other catering workers. She would wear a plain black uniform and comfortable shoes for working. Her hair would be tied back in a simple style, and she would wear almost no makeup. She would look exactly like all the other servers, just another invisible person doing a job. Marcus would arrive later as a guest. He would have to act sad and lonely because his wife was not there. His family would probably make mean comments about Victoria not coming. Marcus would have to stay calm and not defend her too much, or people might get suspicious. Victoria knew this would be hard for both of them. She would have to watch Marcus from far away, pretending she did not know him. She would have to hear people say terrible things about her and not react. She would have to be treated badly and stay quiet. But she believed it was worth it. She needed to see the truth about the Williams family. As Victoria packed her bag that night, she felt both scared and excited. She put in her work uniform, her comfortable shoes, and also a beautiful green dress. That dress was for later, for the moment when she would reveal who she really was. She also packed her jewelry and her wedding ring. When the time was right, she would transform back into Victoria Chen Williams and show everyone what they had done. Marcus watched her pack and shook his head. "My family is going to be so shocked," he said. Victoria smiled. "That's exactly what I want," she replied. "They need to see what their prejudice and rudeness really look like." They need to understand that their behavior has consequences. That night, Victoria could barely sleep. She kept thinking about what might happen. Would the family be as bad as she feared? Would they say terrible things? Would they treat the workers with disrespect? Part of her hoped she was wrong, that maybe the family was not as bad as the rumors said. But deep down, she knew what she would probably see. The next morning, Victoria woke up early. She got dressed in her server uniform and looked at herself one last time. "Here we go," she whispered to her reflection. She kissed Marcus goodbye, and he held her extra tight. "Be careful," he said, "and remember, no matter what happens, I love you and I'm on your side." Victoria smiled at him. "I know," she said. "That's why I can do this," as Victoria walked out the door of their apartment. Heading to the service entrance of the Ashford estate where the wedding would happen, she felt like she was stepping into another world. For the next several hours, she would not be a billionaire. She would not be Marcus's wife. She would be invisible. Just another server that rich people did not even notice. And in that invisibility, she would finally see the truth. The sun was just beginning to rise when Victoria pulled her old borrowed car into the service entrance of the Ashford estate. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she looked at the massive mansion in front of her. This beautiful place, with its perfect gardens and fancy decorations, would be the setting for her experiment in truth. She parked next to several white vans that belonged to the catering company. Other workers were already unloading boxes of plates, glasses, and food supplies. Victoria took a deep breath, checked her appearance one more time in the mirror, and stepped out of the car. She was no longer Victoria Chen Williams, billionaire fashion designer. Now she was just Vicky, a temporary worker trying to make some extra money. Denise met her at the back door with a slight smile. "You ready for this?" Denise whispered. Victoria nodded, trying to calm her racing heart. Denise then spoke louder so others could hear. "Everyone, this is Vicky. She's helping us out today, Vicky. Let me introduce you to the team." The other servers welcomed her warmly. There was Teresa, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a tired smile. There was James, a young man with dreams of becoming a chef someday. There was Maria, who spoke with a thick accent and worked hard to support her family back in Guatemala. There was David, an older gentleman who had been doing catering work for 30 years. These were real people with real lives, and Victoria felt honored to work beside them, even if they did not know who she really was. As they prepared for the day, Victoria listened carefully to their conversations. Teresa talked about her daughter who was studying medicine at a state university. "I work 3 jobs to pay for it," Teresa said with pride in her voice. "But it's worth it. She's going to be a doctor. Can you imagine my baby girl a doctor?" The other workers congratulated her. Sharing in her joy, James showed Victoria how to properly balance a serving tray. "The trick is to keep your center of gravity low," he explained patiently. "And always be aware of where people are moving. Rich folks at these events never look where they're going. They expect you to avoid them." He said this without bitterness, just as a statement of fact. Around 10 in the morning, the Williams family members started arriving to check on the preparations. Victoria's heart began pounding when she saw them. She kept her head down, focusing on polishing wine glasses, but she watched everything from the corner of her eye. Patricia Williams swept into the kitchen area like a queen inspecting her kingdom. She wore an expensive purple dress and diamonds that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. "Where is the event manager?" Patricia demanded loudly, not even looking at the workers around her. The catering manager rushed over. "Yes, Mrs. Williams, how can I help you?" "I want to make sure your people understand the rules," Patricia said, speaking about the workers as if they were not standing right there. "They are to remain quiet unless spoken to. They should not make eye contact with guests. They should stay in the designated service areas unless actively serving. And most importantly, they need to stay away from the gift table and the personal belongings of guests. We've had issues with theft at events before." Victoria felt her blood turn cold. The casual accusation, the assumption that workers would steal, the complete lack of respect. It was even worse than she had imagined. The catering manager, clearly uncomfortable, simply nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Williams, our staff is highly professional." "I'm sure they are. Patricia said in a tone that made clear she was not sure at all. But one can never be too careful these days. She walked away without another word, leaving an uncomfortable silence behind her. Teresa caught Victoria's eye and gave her a sad, knowing smile. "Welcome to our world, honey," Teresa said softly. "That's just how it is at these fancy events. You learn to tune it out, but Victoria could not tune it out. Every cell in her body wanted to speak up, to reveal herself right then and there, but she forced herself to stay calm. This was only the beginning. She needed to see more. As the ceremony time approached, the workers were positioned throughout the venue. Victoria was assigned to the garden area where the wedding would take place. She stood near the back, holding a tray of champagne glasses, ready to offer drinks to guests as they arrived. The guests began flowing in, dressed in their finest clothes. The women wore designer gowns and carried expensive handbags. The men wore tailored suits and Swiss watches. They talked and laughed, air-kissing each other and making small talk about vacations in Europe and new yachts and stock market investments. Victoria was invisible to them. They walked past her, sometimes brushing against her, taking champagne from her tray without even glancing at her face. It was a strange feeling, being physically present but socially non-existent. She had read about this phenomenon in sociology books, but experiencing it was entirely different. Then she saw Marcus arrive. Her heart jumped in her chest. He looked so handsome in his dark suit, but his face showed sadness. He walked in alone, and immediately several family members approached him. "Marcus, darling, where is your wife?" asked Aunt Patricia with fake concern in her voice. "She had business commitments she couldn't cancel," Marcus replied stiffly. Caroline, Patricia's daughter, laughed. "Business commitments, how convenient. Or maybe she just didn't want to be around actual class and culture." Several people around them laughed at this cruel joke. Victoria's hands tightened on her tray, but she kept her face neutral. Marcus's jaw clenched, but he simply walked away without responding. Victoria could see the pain in his eyes, and it broke her heart. The ceremony began, and Victoria stood at her position, watching. The wedding was beautiful, with flowers everywhere and soft music playing. Bradley and Sophia exchanged their vows, promising to love each other forever. It should have been a magical moment. But Victoria could not stop thinking about the ugliness hiding beneath all this beauty. After the ceremony, guests moved to the terrace for cocktail hour. This was when Victoria's real education began. She circulated with her champagne tray, an invisible presence moving through the crowd, and she heard everything. She heard Bradley's friends making racist jokes. She heard bridesmaids tearing apart other women's appearances. She heard businessmen discussing ways to cheat on their taxes. She heard it all, and nobody cared because nobody thought a server mattered enough to listen. Then came Victoria's first direct confrontation. She was offering champagne when Caroline reached out and grabbed a glass. As Victoria started to move away, Caroline suddenly called out, "You!" "Wait," Victoria turned back, her heart pounding. "Yes, ma'am." Caroline looked her up and down with cold eyes. "Make sure you and the rest of the help stay away from the gift table. We've already given instructions about this, but I want to be clear. We're watching." She said this loud enough for nearby guests to hear, and several of them nodded in agreement. The implication was crystal clear. Caroline was suggesting that the workers, especially the black workers, might steal from the gifts. Victoria felt humiliation burn through her, but she simply nodded and walked away behind her. She heard Caroline say to her friends, "You really have to spell things out for these people. They don't understand proper behavior." Teresa appeared beside Victoria a moment later. "Don't let them get inside your head, baby," Teresa whispered, putting a gentle hand on Victoria's arm. "People like that, their opinions don't mean nothing. They judge everybody because they're empty inside." Victoria blinked back tears of rage and gratitude. In that moment, she felt a connection to Teresa and the other workers that was more real than anything she had ever experienced with the Williams family. These people faced this treatment every single day, and yet they maintained their dignity and kindness. They were stronger than any of the wealthy guests in that garden. As the cocktail hour continued, Victoria realized something important. This experiment was changing her. She had thought she understood prejudice and class discrimination, but actually experiencing it was teaching her things she could never have learned otherwise. The casual cruelty, the constant microaggressions, the feeling of being treated as less than human. It was exhausting and The reception hall glowed with thousands of tiny lights as guests moved from cocktail hour to dinner. Victoria followed the other servers into the grand ballroom, her feet already aching in the cheap shoes she had bought for this charade. The room was decorated like something from a fairy tale, with crystal chandeliers, white roses everywhere, and tables covered in silk cloths. It was beautiful. But Victoria now saw it differently. She saw the workers who had spent hours setting it all up. People whose names the guests would never know. The seating chart placed the most important family members at tables near the bride and groom. Victoria was assigned to serve this section, which meant she would be close to Patricia, Caroline, and the others all evening. She told herself to stay strong, to keep watching and listening. As guests found their seats, Victoria moved between tables with a water pitcher, filling glasses. An older woman at one table pulled her chair back suddenly. Slamming it into Victoria's leg, Victoria stumbled but caught herself. The woman did not apologize or even turn around. She simply continued her conversation as if nothing had happened. Victoria bit her lip and continued working. James caught her eye from across the room and gave her an encouraging nod. He had probably experienced 1,000 moments like that. Victoria thought, how did he stay so kind and patient? She was beginning to understand that the workers around her possessed a strength that the wealthy guests could never comprehend. Dinner service began, and Victoria carried plates of expensive food to the head table. The first course was a delicate soup with truffles. As she placed a bowl in front of Sophia, the bride wrinkled her nose. "This is cold," Sophia announced loudly. "Take it back and bring me a hot one." Victoria picked up the bowl. "Of course, ma'am." The soup was actually the perfect temperature, but she brought it to the kitchen anyway. The chef reheated it and Victoria brought it back. Sophia tasted it and made a face. "Now it's too hot." "Don't you people know how to serve soup properly?" Victoria replaced the bowl again. This time Sophia ate 3 spoonfuls and pushed it away. "I don't like truffles anyway," she said. Waving her hand dismissively, Victoria cleared the barely touched soup, thinking about how that single bowl probably cost more than Teresa made in a day of work. But the worst moments came when Victoria stood behind the head table, refilling wine glasses. This position meant she could hear the family's conversations clearly, and what she heard made her blood boil. Patricia leaned toward Caroline and spoke in a voice she clearly thought was quiet enough. "I still cannot believe Marcus married that Chinese woman," Patricia said with disgust in her tone. "What was he thinking?" "We have standards in this family," Caroline nodded eagerly. "Mother, did you see how she embarrassed herself at the charity gala? She actually questioned the foundation's spending in front of major donors. She has no understanding of how things work in our world." Victoria remembered that gala. She had discovered that the Williams Foundation spent only 12% of donations on actual charity work. The rest went to parties, salaries, and mysterious administrative costs. She had thought raising this issue was responsible. Now she understood it had been used as evidence of her inadequacy. Richard Williams, Bradley's father, joined the conversation. "Marcus could have married the Anderson girl," he said, "or the Thompson daughter, both from excellent families. Instead, he brings home someone who probably sees him as a lottery ticket." Victoria's hand trembled slightly as she poured wine, but years of business meetings had taught her to control her reactions. She moved away from the table before anyone noticed. In the kitchen, she found Teresa sitting on a stool, rubbing her swollen ankles. "You holding up okay?" "Vicky?" Teresa asked with concern. "I'm fine," Victoria lied. "Just not used to being on my feet this long." "It gets easier," Teresa said. "Or maybe you just get numbered to it. I've been doing this kind of work since I was 16. That's 34 years of standing and smiling while people treat you like furniture." She said this without self-pity, just stating a simple fact. "How do you deal with it?" Victoria asked. Genuinely wanting to know, Teresa smiled. "I remember why I'm doing it. I'm doing it for my daughter, for a better life for her. And I remember that these rich folks with all their money and fancy clothes, they're not better than me, they're just luckier. Being rich doesn't make you a good person. Being kind does, being honest does. Working hard for your family does, by those measures. I'm richer than most people in that ballroom." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. Teresa's wisdom and dignity were worth more than all the Williams family wealth combined. The evening continued, and the cruelty continued with it. Victoria watched Bradley snap his fingers at servers. Never saying please or thank you, she saw guests leave messes on purpose. dropping napkins on the floor and spilling drinks. Knowing someone else would clean it up, she heard constant complaints. The music was too loud, the food was too cold, the wine was the wrong temperature. Nothing was ever good enough. Then came the incident that made Victoria's decision final, the incident that proved everything she had suspected about this family. Richard Williams stood up from his table, clearly drunk. He had been drinking heavily all evening, and now his words were slurred. He stumbled toward the hallway that led to the bathrooms. Victoria was clearing plates nearby and saw him bump into James, who was carrying a tray of empty glasses. "Watch where you're going," Richard growled at James, even though Richard had been the one not watching. "Sorry, sir," James said politely. "Are you all right?" Richard's eyes narrowed. He patted his jacket pocket, then his pants pockets. Then his face twisted with anger. "My wallet," he said loudly. "My wallet is missing." The nearby guests turned to look. Richard pointed an accusing finger at James. "You, empty your pockets. Right now." James's face showed shock and hurt. "Sir, I haven't touched anything. I've been working all evening." "I said empty your pockets," Richard repeated, his voice carrying across the room now. More guests were gathering, drawn by the commotion. The accusation was clear and ugly. Richard was accusing James of being a thief, and he was doing it in front of everyone. Victoria watched in horror as James, his face burning with humiliation, had to turn out his pockets in front of the crowd. His hands shook as he pulled out his own wallet. His phone, some loose change, nothing else. The other workers had stopped what they were doing. Watching this degradation of their colleague, Richard stared at James's belongings, then simply turned and walked away. No apology, no acknowledgement that he had been wrong. He just left James standing there, dignity destroyed. While the guests slowly returned to their conversations, Victoria learned later that Richard had left his wallet in his car. He had never brought it inside at all. She found James in the kitchen a few minutes later. He was leaning against the wall, his eyes closed, trying to compose himself. 22 years, he said quietly. 22 years I've been doing this work. I have a clean record. I've never stolen anything in my life. But they still look at us and see criminals. Teresa put her arm around James. They're ignorant, James. That's not about you. That's about them. But Victoria knew it was about more than ignorance. It was about a system that allowed people like Richard to treat people like James as less than human. It was about privilege and prejudice and the ugly assumption that poor people, especially poor black people, were inherently dishonest. Victoria excused herself and went to the bathroom. She looked at herself in the mirror, at this disguise she was wearing. She had seen enough, more than enough. These people did not deserve her silence anymore. They did not deserve her patience or her understanding. She pulled out her phone and texted Denise. "Gather all the staff in the ballroom in 30 minutes. Tell them there's a special announcement and a bonus. It's time." She also texted Marcus, "Be ready." Everything is about to change. Then Victoria went to retrieve the bag she had hidden that morning. Inside was her real self, the woman these people had dismissed and insulted without even knowing she was watching. It was time for the invisible woman to become impossible to ignore. As she changed into her designer gown and put on her jewelry, Victoria felt a strange calm settle over her. She was about to walk into that ballroom and shatter every assumption they had made. She was about to show them exactly what their prejudice looked like, and she was going to make sure they never forgot it. Victoria stood in the small private bathroom, staring at her reflection as she transformed. The cheap server uniform lay crumpled on the floor, replaced by an emerald green Valentino gown that hugged her body perfectly. The dress cost more than most people earned in 6 months, but right now its value was not in the price tag. It was in what it represented: power, status, and the ability to be seen. She fastened her diamond necklace, the one Marcus had given her on their first anniversary. Her wedding ring went back on her finger. Catching the light and throwing tiny rainbows across the bathroom walls, she let her hair down, running her fingers through it until it fell in glossy waves over her shoulders. Finally, she applied lipstick, a bold red that gave her courage. The woman in the mirror was no longer Vicky, the invisible server. This was Victoria Chen Williams, billionaire, businesswoman, and someone who was about to make a lot of wealthy people very uncomfortable. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "What's happening?" "Are you okay?" she typed back. "Better than okay. Stay near the ballroom entrance. You'll want to see this." Another text from Denise. "Staff is gathered. They're confused but excited about the bonus. Ready when you are." Victoria took 3 deep breaths, smoothed her dress one final time, and opened the bathroom door. The hallway was empty. Most guests were still in the ballroom. Enjoying dessert and after-dinner drinks, she could hear music and laughter, the sounds of people who believed their world was secure. They had no idea what was coming. Victoria walked toward the ballroom, her heels clicking confidently on the marble floor. As she approached the entrance, she saw Marcus standing near the doorway, exactly where she had asked him to be. When he spotted her, his eyes widened. A slow smile spread across his face. He knew his wife well enough to recognize that look in her eyes. She was about to do something unforgettable. Inside the ballroom, the event coordinator was wrapping up some announcements about the evening's schedule. Victoria had arranged this with him earlier through Denise. He caught her eye and gave a small nod. "And now, ladies and gentlemen," he said into the microphone, "we have an unexpected guest who would like to share a few words with you all." The room quieted. Guests turned toward the entrance with curious expressions. Some looked annoyed at the interruption. Patricia looked irritated. Bradley and Sophia looked confused. The catering staff, gathered near the service entrance as instructed, looked bewildered. Victoria stepped through the doorway. The reaction was immediate and electric. Gasps swept through the room like a wave. Patricia's champagne glass slipped from her hand. Shattering on the floor, Caroline's mouth fell open. Her eyes huge with shock, Richard stopped mid-sentence in whatever story he was telling. Bradley grabbed Sophia's arm as if he needed support. But the most powerful reaction came from Marcus. His face showed pride, love, and a fierce satisfaction. He had watched his family mistreat his wife for 3 years. Now he was about to watch her show them exactly who she was. The catering staff looked utterly confused. Teresa's hand flew to her mouth. James stood frozen, staring. Maria whispered something in Spanish. Denise, who knew the plan, was grinning from ear to ear. Victoria walked to the microphone with perfect poise. The crowd parted automatically, people stepping back as if moved by an invisible force. No one could take their eyes off her. She reached the microphone and paused, letting the silence build, letting the tension grow. "Good evening," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but I thought it was time for a proper introduction. My name is Victoria Chen Williams. I am Marcus Williams's wife, and for the past 12 hours, I have been working as a member of your catering staff." The ballroom erupted in confused whispers and shocked exclamations. Victoria raised her hand and the room fell silent again. The power in that gesture was unmistakable. She commanded attention now in a way that Vicky the server never could. "I know this seems strange," Victoria continued, "but I had very good reasons, you see. I have been hearing stories for 3 years now, stories about what this family thinks of me, how I am not good enough, how I married Marcus for his money, how I do not belong in your world. I wanted to see for myself how you all behave when you think no one important is watching." Patricia found her voice, shrill and angry. "This is absolutely ridiculous, Marcus. Do something about your wife." Marcus stepped forward. Moving to stand beside Victoria, he took her hand, and his message was clear to everyone in that room. "Let her speak," he said firmly. "I want to hear this." Victoria squeezed his hand gratefully, then continued. "I have spent today serving you, clearing your tables, refilling your drinks, being invisible, and I have learned so much about who you really are." She looked directly at Patricia. "I heard you, Aunt Patricia. I heard you talking about me on the terrace. I heard you tell Marcus that I am using him, that I am not your kind of people. I heard you discussing your plan to pressure him into signing a post-nuptial agreement tonight, while he was feeling vulnerable and alone." Patricia's face turned bright red, then pale. "You had no right to spy on private conversations." "Private," Victoria repeated. "You were on the terrace at a wedding with 200 guests, and besides, when you talk about me, I have every right to listen. I am his wife. I am part of this family whether you accept it or not." She turned to face Richard. "Mr. Williams, I watched you accuse James of stealing your wallet. I watched you humiliate him in front of all these guests, force him to empty his pockets, treat him like a criminal. And when you discovered you were wrong, that you had left your wallet in your car, you did not apologize. You did not acknowledge his humanity. You just walked away as if his dignity meant nothing," Richard sputtered, trying to form words, but nothing coherent came out. "Caroline," Victoria said, looking at Patricia's daughter, "you told me to stay away from the gift table because you had experienced theft at events before. You said this loudly, making sure everyone heard you, implying that the workers here, especially the black workers, were potential thieves. That was not just rude. It was racist. Caroline's face went white. I did not mean it that way. Yes. You did, Victoria said firmly. You meant exactly what you said. And that is the problem with all of you. You say cruel things, you treat people badly, and then you pretend you did not mean it that way. But your actions show your true character. She turned to address the entire room now. This family is very proud of its status, its wealth, its place in society. But today I have seen what lies beneath the expensive clothes and perfect manners. I have seen casual cruelty. I have seen people treated as less than human simply because they work for a living. I have seen prejudice and racism, and an ugliness that all your money cannot hide. The staff members were watching with tears in their eyes. No one had ever defended them like this. No one had ever acknowledged their experiences or validated their dignity in front of the people who dismissed them. These people you have been ignoring all night. Victoria gestured to the catering staff. They have names and stories and dreams. Teresa is working 3 jobs to put her daughter through medical school. James wants to open his own restaurant someday. Maria sends money home to support her elderly parents in Guatemala. They are not invisible. They are not your servants. They are human beings who deserve your respect. She paused, letting her words sink in around the ballroom. Some guests looked ashamed. Others looked defensive or angry. But everyone was listening. No one could look away. Let me tell you about my own background, Victoria said. Since it seems to fascinate you so much, yes, I am Chinese American. My parents came to this country with almost nothing. My father washed dishes while going to school at night. My mother cleaned houses for families probably very much like yours. They saved every penny to give me opportunities. She saw several guests shift uncomfortably in their seats. I built my fashion company from nothing, Victoria continued. I started with a single small store that I ran out of a converted garage. I worked 16-hour days. I made mistakes, I learned, I grew. Today, my company is worth $1.2 billion. We employ over 5,000 people in 15 countries. We maintain ethical supply chains and pay fair wages, which is more than I can say for some businesses in this room, Patricia gasped. But Victoria was not finished. I did not marry Marcus for money, she said, looking at her husband with love. I married him because he is kind and intelligent, because he sees people as human beings, not as status symbols. But this family has made it clear from the beginning that I am not welcome. Not because of anything I have done wrong, but because of who I am, where I come from, and what I look like. The truth of her words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. This was the moment everything changed. The ballroom remained frozen in stunned silence. Victoria could feel 200 pairs of eyes locked on her, some filled with shame, others with anger, but all of them finally seeing her. Really seeing her for the first time. She was no longer invisible, no longer someone they could dismiss or ignore. Patricia, Victoria continued, her voice steady and strong. You said earlier today that love is temporary, but family is forever. I heard you say this while you were plotting against my marriage. But I completely disagree with you. Patricia's face was a mixture of rage and humiliation, but she said nothing. The family you are born into may be forever, Victoria said. But love, real love, is a choice you make every single day. Marcus has chosen me and I have chosen him. That choice, that commitment, is worth more than all your old money and family trees and social connections. Our love is built on respect, on seeing each other as equals, on valuing character over status, something this family seems incapable of understanding. Marcus squeezed her hand tighter, his eyes shining with emotion. In that moment, Victoria knew that no matter what happened next, they would face it together. She turned to address the catering staff directly. Teresa, James, Maria, David, and everyone else who worked this event today. I want to thank you. Thank you for welcoming me into your team, even though I was a stranger. Thank you for your kindness, your professionalism, and your grace in the face of constant disrespect. You showed me what real class actually looks like. And it has nothing to do with bank accounts or last names. Teresa was crying openly now. James had his arm around her shoulders. The other workers stood together, a united group who had finally been acknowledged. Victoria reached into her small purse and pulled out her phone. Denise has an envelope for each of you, she said. Inside, you will find a check as a bonus for your exceptional work today. Consider it a small token of my appreciation. What the staff did not know yet was that each envelope contained a check for $15,000. Victoria had also included her business card and a personal note offering job opportunities at her company for anyone interested. She knew that money alone could not undo the years of disrespect they had faced, but it was a start. "You did not have to do that," Teresa called out, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I did," Victoria replied softly. "You deserve it and so much more. You deserve to be treated with dignity every single day, not just when someone rich decides to notice you." She turned back to face the Williams family, and now her expression hardened. The kindness she had shown the staff was replaced by cold determination. "Now let us talk about consequences," she said. Patricia stood up from her table. "I will not stand here and be lectured by someone who married into this family 5 minutes ago." "Sit down." "Patricia," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. "You wanted to know who my wife really is, now you are going to find out." Patricia hesitated, then slowly sank back into her chair, for perhaps the first time in her life. She realized she was not in control. "You mentioned earlier that you hired a private investigator to look into my business," Victoria said. "Save your money. Everything about my company is completely transparent and legal. We are audited regularly by independent firms. We have won awards for our ethical practices. We have nothing to hide," she paused, letting that sink in. "But since you are so interested in investigations, perhaps we should discuss the Williams Foundation." The color drained from Patricia's face. Richard suddenly looked very interested in his empty wine glass. Caroline gripped the edge of the table. "You see, I have done some investigating of my own," Victoria continued. "It is remarkable what you can discover when you actually care about where money goes. The Williams Foundation claims to be a charitable organization. You host fancy galas, you collect millions in donations. You take beautiful photos with children in poor countries." She pulled out her phone and swiped through some files. "But according to your own tax returns, which are public record by the way, the Williams Foundation spends only 11% of donations on actual charitable programs. 11%? The rest goes to salaries, administrative costs, travel expenses, and event planning, which seems to mostly mean parties for wealthy donors." Several guests gasped. Bradley looked shocked. He clearly had not known this. Sophia whispered something to him urgently. "That party you threw last month at the Four Seasons," Victoria continued. "The one to raise money for education in Africa. Do you know how much that party cost? $600,000. Do you know how much money you sent to schools in Africa afterwards? $42,000. You spent more on flower arrangements than you sent to the actual cause." Patricia found her voice again. "Those events are necessary to attract donors." "Are they?" Victoria challenged. "Because my company runs a charitable foundation too. We spend 87% of our funds directly on programs. We hold modest events, we use digital marketing. We focus on impact rather than champagne and caviar, and we raise more money than you do. So your excuse about needing expensive parties is simply false. It is about wanting to feel important and charitable without actually doing the hard work of helping people." The room was absolutely silent now. Even the staff had stopped moving. Everyone was transfixed by this confrontation. "But the financial waste is not even the worst part," Victoria said. "The worst part is the hypocrisy. You stand here judging me, questioning my character, suggesting I married Marcus for money. Meanwhile, you are running a charity that essentially takes money from well-meaning donors and uses it to fund your lavish lifestyle. You are the opportunists, not me." Richard stood up angrily. "How dare you make these accusations?" "They are not accusations," Victoria said calmly. "They are facts. Would you like me to project your tax returns on the screen? I have them right here on my phone." "Public record, remember," Richard sat down. Victoria looked around the room at all the guests. "I want everyone here to understand something. I did not do this tonight for revenge. I did not do this to embarrass anyone. I did this because silence enables cruelty. I stayed silent for 3 years while this family disrespected me. And my silence made them think their behavior was acceptable, so today I decided to stop being silent." She walked slowly around the room as she spoke. "How many of you treat service workers as invisible? How many of you snap your fingers at waiters? Or complain about people doing their best to serve you? Or make assumptions about someone's character based on their job? How many of you have ever bothered to learn the name of the person cleaning your office or serving your coffee?" Several guests looked down at their plates. unable to meet her eyes. Wealth does not make you better than anyone, Victoria said. It just makes you luckier. What you do with that wealth, how you treat people, whether you use your privilege to lift others up or push them down, that is what reveals your character. And tonight, this family's character has been on full display. She stopped walking and stood in the center of the room. I am giving this family a choice, she said. You can continue on the path you are on, treating people badly, running a fraudulent charity, judging others while ignoring your own failings. Or you can change. You can start treating people with respect. You can reform your foundation to actually help people. You can acknowledge that everyone deserves dignity regardless of their job or background or race. Patricia stood up again. And if we do not accept your demands? Victoria smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then Marcus and I will be starting our own Williams family tradition. One based on kindness, integrity, and actual charitable work. We will have nothing more to do with you. And I will make sure that everyone in your social circle knows exactly what kind of people you are. Your tax returns will be sent to every major newspaper. Your foundation's practices will be exposed. Your reputation, the only thing you seem to care about, will be destroyed. The threat hung in the air. Clear and powerful, Victoria was not bluffing. She had the resources, the evidence, and the determination to follow through. Marcus stood and walked to the center of the room to join his wife. I stand with Victoria, he announced. Completely and absolutely, this family has a choice to make change. Or lose us forever. Bradley suddenly stood up. Surprising everyone, I did not know, he said, his voice shaking. About the foundation. About how bad things were, Victoria, I apologize, you are right. This has to change, Sophia nodded beside him. We want to be better. One by one, other family members began to stand. Some nodding, some speaking words of agreement. Not everyone, Patricia remained seated, her face hard. But enough people stood that Victoria knew her message had been heard. The revolution had begun. The ballroom had transformed from a celebration into something that felt more like a courtroom. Victoria stood in the center, no longer the accused, but the judge. And the Williams family was finally being held accountable. The atmosphere was thick with tension, but also with something else, the possibility of change. Bradley's unexpected support had created a crack in the family's united front. His wife Sophia whispered to him, and he nodded, then spoke again. Aunt Patricia, I love you, but Victoria's right. I have been part of this family my whole life, and I have seen how we treat people. I never questioned it because it was just how things were. But that does not make it right. Patricia looked at her nephew as if he had betrayed her. Bradley, this is your wedding day. Do not let this woman ruin it with her theatrics. She is not ruining anything, Bradley said firmly. She is telling the truth. And maybe we needed to hear it, especially today. If Sophia and I are starting our marriage, I want it to be built on something better than what I grew up with. Sophia stood and took her new husband's hand. My family is not perfect either, she said to the room. But one thing my grandmother taught me is that money without character is just paper. She grew up poor, worked her whole life, and she always said that how you treat people when they cannot do anything for you, that shows who you really are. More family members were standing now. Marcus's younger cousin Jennifer spoke up. I am tired of pretending, she said, her voice shaking. I am tired of these fake parties and fake charity and fake kindness. Victoria, I apologize for how I treated you. I was following everyone else's lead, but that is no excuse. Patricia stood up so fast her chair fell backward. This is absurd. You are all being manipulated. This woman comes in here dressed as a servant, spying on us. And now you are taking her side. She came in dressed as a servant, Marcus said, because that is how she knew she would see the truth. And the truth is ugly, Aunt Patricia, admit it. You have treated Victoria terribly since the day I introduced her, not because of anything she did, but because of where she comes from and what she looks like. That is not true, Patricia protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Then explain the comments, Marcus challenged. Explain telling people she is using me for money. Explain hiring a private investigator. Explain the constant exclusion from family events. Explain all of it without admitting your prejudice. Patricia opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no explanation that did not reveal exactly what Marcus was accusing her of. Victoria watched this unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She had wanted to expose the truth, but seeing a family tear itself apart was still painful. I did not come here to destroy this family, she said. I came here to save my marriage from being poisoned by your judgment. Marcus and I love each other. But your constant criticism and disrespect were creating a wedge between us. She looked at Patricia. You said I do not understand your world. But I understand it perfectly. I understand that you measure people by their last names and their bank accounts instead of their character. I understand that you value appearance over substance, tradition over growth. I understand your world. I just refuse to accept that it is the only world or the right world. Teresa, still standing with the other catering staff, suddenly spoke up. Ma'am, if I may, she said hesitantly. Victoria turned to her. Of course, Teresa. Please. Teresa took a breath. I have been working events like this for 34 years. I have served some of the richest families in this city, and I have seen all kinds of people. Some rich folks treat us with respect. They say please and thank you. They look at us like we are human beings. But others, she paused, looking around the room. Others treat us like we are invisible, or worse, like we are beneath them. She looked at Patricia. You asked earlier how we dare judge you, but ma'am, we see everything. We see how you talk when you think no one is listening. We see how you treat people who cannot fight back. We see the real you and what Victoria did today. Pretending to be one of us, she just saw what we see every single day. James stepped forward to stand beside Teresa. She is right, he said. When Mr. Williams accused me of stealing tonight, that was not the first time something like that has happened. It happens all the time. We get blamed for things we did not do. We get treated with suspicion. We get disrespected. And we have to smile and say yes, sir, and no, ma'am, because we need the job. But it hurts every single time it hurts, Maria spoke next, her accent thick but her words clear. In my country, I was a teacher, she said. I taught English to children for 12 years. But I came here for a better life, and now I clean houses and serve at parties. My family back home thinks I am living the American dream. They do not know that here, people look at me and see only a maid. They do not see the person I was or the person I still am. Victoria felt tears rolling down her cheeks. These stories were exactly why she had done this. These were the voices that wealthy people never heard because they never bothered to listen. David, the oldest server, spoke last. I am 63 years old, he said. I have worked honest jobs my whole life. I raised 3 kids, I put them all through college. I am proud of my life, but I am tired. I am so tired of being treated like I do not matter. Tonight, having someone stand up for us, having someone see us, that means more than you can know. The room was silent except for the sound of people crying. Even some of the Williams family members had tears in their eyes. The staff's testimonies had done what Victoria's accusations could not. They had made the wealthy guests see the human cost of their behavior. Richard Williams stood up and everyone turned to look at him. He had been silent since Victoria exposed his false accusation against James. Now he walked across the ballroom to where James stood. The room held its breath. I owe you an apology, Richard said, his voice rough with emotion. What I did tonight was wrong. I accused you without evidence. I humiliated you publicly. I treated you as if you were guilty simply because of who you are. I am sorry, truly sorry, James looked surprised. Thank you, sir, he said quietly. And I owe all of you an apology, Richard continued, turning to address the other workers. I have been attending events like this my whole life, and I never once thought about how we treat the people who make these events possible. That was wrong. I was wrong. Patricia was still standing, her face hard and angry, but Victoria could see something else in her eyes now. Uncertainty. The united front she had counted on was crumbling. Her own husband had just apologized to the staff. Her nephew had sided with Victoria. Other family members were openly agreeing with the changes Victoria demanded. This is emotional manipulation. Patricia tried one more time. You are all being played. No, Mother, Caroline said suddenly, and everyone turned to stare at her. We are finally being honest. Patricia looked at her daughter in shock. Caroline had always been her strongest ally, her echo in every cruel comment. I said terrible things today, Caroline continued, tears streaming down her face. I said them because that is what I learned. That is what I thought was normal. But Victoria is right. It is not normal. It is not acceptable. And I do not want to be that person anymore. She walked over to where Victoria stood. I am sorry, Caroline said. For today, for the past 3 years, For everything. You tried to be part of this family, and we rejected you. We judged you. We disrespected you. And you did not deserve any of it. Victoria looked at Caroline for a long moment, searching her face for sincerity. What she saw there was genuine remorse, genuine desire to change. "Thank you," Victoria said. "I accept your apology, but apologizing is just the beginning. Real change requires action." "I know," Caroline said. "Tell me what to do. How do we fix this?" Victoria looked around the ballroom at all the faces watching her, some hopeful, some afraid, some still resistant. "We start by acknowledging that everyone deserves respect," she said. "We start by really seeing the people around us, learning their names, understanding their stories. We reform the foundation to actually help people instead of funding parties. We use our privilege and resources to lift others up instead of keeping them down." She paused. "And we start tonight, right now. Everyone in this room, family and staff alike, we are going to sit down together. Not as employers and employees, not as wealthy and working class, but as human beings. We are going to share a meal, we are going to talk, we are going to listen." Patricia made a sound of disbelief. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious," Victoria said. "And if you cannot do this one simple thing, if you cannot share a table with people you consider beneath you, then you prove everything I have said about this family." Marcus stepped forward. "I think it is a wonderful idea," he said. He walked over to Teresa and extended his hand. "Would you join us? Please, I would like to hear about your daughter." Teresa took his hand, smiling through her tears. "I would be honored." One by one, family members approached the staff, extending invitations, offering seats at their tables. The barriers that had seemed so solid just an hour ago were dissolving. Not everyone participated. Patricia remained standing alone, rigid with anger. But enough people joined that the ballroom began to transform once again, from a site of confrontation into something that looked almost like reconciliation. Victoria watched it happen. Exhausted but hopeful, the night was not over yet. There was still more to come, but this was a start. The transformation that followed was unlike anything Victoria had imagined. The rigid social boundaries that had defined the evening began to dissolve as family members and catering staff slowly, awkwardly, began to mix. It was uncomfortable at first. Decades of separation and class division could not disappear in a moment, but something was shifting. Marcus guided Teresa to a table near the center of the room, pulling out a chair for her with genuine courtesy. James found himself sitting between Bradley and Sophia, who were asking him questions about his dream of opening a restaurant. Maria sat with Jennifer and several younger family members who wanted to hear about her life in Guatemala and her journey to America. The waitstaff who had been invisible just an hour ago were now the center of attention. Their stories, their experiences, their humanity was finally being acknowledged. Some conversations were stilted and uncertain, the wealthy guests clearly unsure how to talk to people they had ignored all evening. But other conversations flowed naturally, revealing the common ground that had always existed beneath the artificial barriers. Victoria moved through the room, observing this unlikely gathering. She stopped at the table where David sat with Richard and several other older family members. David was showing them photos of his grandchildren on his phone, his face glowing with pride. "This is Marcus Jr.," David said, pointing to a young man in a graduation gown. "He just graduated from Howard University, first in our family to get a master's degree. He is going to be a civil engineer." "That is remarkable," Richard said, and he sounded genuinely impressed. "You must be very proud." "I am," David replied. "I worked 3 jobs sometimes to help with his tuition, but seeing him walk across that stage, that made every long night worth it." Richard was quiet for a moment, then said, "My grandfather worked his way up from nothing too. Started as a factory worker, saved every penny, eventually bought the factory. I grew up hearing those stories, but somewhere along the way I forgot them. I forgot where we came from." Victoria felt a small spark of hope. Maybe some of these people could actually change. Maybe confronting them with truth had cracked open something that had been sealed shut for too long. She found Marcus sitting with Teresa, and she joined them, Teresa was showing Marcus pictures of her daughter Jasmine in her medical school white coat. "She is in her 3rd year now," Teresa said, her voice full of pride. "She wants to be a pediatrician. She has always loved children. Ever since she was little, she would take care of the neighborhood kids." "What made you decide to work 3 jobs to support her education?" Marcus asked. Teresa smiled. "Because I did not want her to have limits on her dreams," she said. "I grew up poor. I did not have chances to go to college, but I knew if I worked hard enough I could give my daughter opportunities I never had. That is what parents do. We sacrifice so our children can fly higher than we ever could." Victoria reached across the table and took Teresa's hand. "You are an incredible mother," she said. "Jasmine is lucky to have you." "I am the lucky one," Teresa replied, squeezing Victoria's hand. "And thank you for today for standing up for us. Nobody has ever done that before." Across the room, Caroline was deep in conversation with James about his culinary ambitions. "So what kind of restaurant would you open?" Caroline asked. "Soul food," James said, his eyes lighting up. "My grandmother's recipes. The food I grew up eating. But elevated, you know. Taking traditional dishes and presenting them in a fine dining way. Showing that soul food deserves the same respect as French or Italian cuisine." "That sounds amazing," Caroline said. "Have you written a business plan? Do you know what you would need to get started?" James laughed. "I have notebooks full of ideas," he said. "But the reality is I do not have the capital. Banks do not give loans to people like me, and investors want to see proven track records. I have been saving for years, but it is slow." Caroline pulled out her phone. "Can I have your email?" she asked. "I have some contacts in the restaurant investment world. I cannot promise anything, but maybe I can make some introductions." James stared at her. "You would do that after everything?" "I want to," Caroline said. "I want to be part of something good. I have spent my whole life going to parties and spending money on meaningless things. Maybe it is time I actually helped someone build something real." Victoria watched this exchange from across the room, and she felt tears prick her eyes again. This was what she had hoped for. Not just acknowledgement of wrongdoing, but actual change, actual connection between people who had been separated by walls of prejudice and class. Not everyone was participating in this transformation. Patricia still stood alone near the entrance, her arms crossed, her face set in lines of stubborn resistance. A few other older family members sat at a separate table, talking quietly among themselves, refusing to join the mixing, but they were the minority now. The majority of the family had chosen to try. Denise approached Victoria with a wide smile. "Girl, when you told me your plan, I thought you were crazy," Denise said. "But this, what is happening right now? This is beautiful." "It is a start," Victoria said carefully. "One evening does not undo years of prejudice. Real change takes time and consistent effort." "But it is a start," Denise agreed. "And sometimes that is all you need. One crack in the wall, and eventually the whole thing comes down." The evening continued, and the conversations deepened. Bradley announced that he and Sophia would be making a substantial donation directly to James's restaurant fund. Jennifer committed to volunteering at a community center where Maria's children attended after-school programs. Several family members pledged to audit the Williams Foundation and restructure it to actually serve the communities it claimed to help. Marcus stood and called for everyone's attention. "I want to say something," he announced. The room quieted. 3 years ago, I married the most remarkable woman I have ever met. I knew my family had reservations, but I did not fully understand the depth of the prejudice Victoria was facing. I should have seen it sooner. I should have stood up stronger. For that, I apologize." He looked at Victoria with love. "But tonight my wife showed incredible courage. She showed all of us who we really are. The good and the bad." She held up a mirror, and some of what we saw was ugly. But she also showed us that we can be better, that we can change, that we can build bridges instead of walls. Marcus raised his glass. To Victoria, to honesty, to change, and to treating every person with the dignity they deserve. To Victoria, the room echoed, and glasses were raised all around. Even some of the reluctant family members joined the toast, though Patricia remained motionless, her glass untouched as the evening began to wind down. The catering staff prepared to leave. But this time their departure was different. Family members shook their hands, exchanged phone numbers, made genuine connections. Teresa hugged Victoria tightly. "You changed something tonight," Teresa whispered. "Maybe not everything, maybe not forever, but you changed something and that matters." "You changed me too," Victoria whispered back. "You showed me what real strength looks like." James approached with tears in his eyes. "I have been doing this work for over 20 years, he said. "And tonight is the first time I felt like I mattered to the people I was serving. Thank you." As the staff filed out, each carrying their envelope with the unexpected bonus, Victoria felt a profound sense of accomplishment. But she also felt the weight of responsibility. She had started something tonight, and now she would need to see it through. Patricia finally moved from her position near the entrance. She walked slowly toward Victoria, and the room fell silent. Everyone watched, wondering what would happen. Patricia stopped in front of Victoria, her face a complicated mixture of emotions, anger, shame, confusion, pride warring with the reality of what had happened. "You humiliated me tonight," Patricia said, her voice low. "No," Victoria replied calmly. "I told the truth. You humiliated yourself with your actions. I just made sure people could see them clearly." Patricia's jaw clenched. "This family will never be the same." "I hope not," Victoria said. Because the way it was broken. The two women stared at each other, neither backing down. Finally, Patricia turned and walked out of the ballroom without another word. Caroline moved to follow her mother, but Victoria caught her arm. "Let her go," Victoria said gently. "She needs time. Change is hardest for the people who benefited most from the old way of doing things." Caroline nodded. "Will she ever forgive you?" "I do not need her forgiveness," Victoria said. "I need her to change, and if she cannot do that, then at least the rest of you can." Marcus came to stand beside his wife, wrapping his arm around her waist. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Victoria looked around the ballroom one last time, at the family members still talking with each other, processing the events of the evening, at the space where the catering staff had stood, now empty but somehow still filled with their presence. "Yes," she said, "I'm ready." But as they walked toward the exit, Victoria knew that this night was not an ending. It was a beginning. The real work of change was just starting, and it would require sustained effort, patience, and constant vigilance. The question was, would the Williams family rise to the challenge, or would they slip back into old patterns once the shock of tonight wore off? Only time would tell. Victoria woke up the next morning to sunlight streaming through the windows of their penthouse. For a moment she lay still, wondering if the previous night had been a dream. Then she felt Marcus's arm around her waist and saw her emerald gown draped over a chair, still slightly wrinkled from the evening's events. It had all been real. Her phone was buzzing on the nightstand. She reached for it carefully, trying not to wake Marcus. 23 missed calls, 47 text messages. Her email inbox showed over 100 new messages. The night's events were creating ripples that were spreading far beyond the Ashford estate. The first text was from Denise, sent at 6 in the morning. "Girl, you are all over social media. Someone recorded parts of your speech and it is going viral. Call me when you wake up." Victoria's heart started racing. She had not thought about phones recording, about the speech spreading beyond that ballroom. She quickly searched her name online. The results were overwhelming. Videos of her revelation, of her confrontation with the Williams family, were spreading across every platform. Some showed her in her server uniform. Others showed her dramatic entrance in the designer gown. The hashtags were already trending. Justice served. Invisible no more. Billionaire undercover. The comments were mixed. Thousands of people praised her courage, sharing their own stories of being treated poorly by wealthy employers. Others criticized her for deception, called her manipulative, said she had humiliated people who deserved privacy. Some called it a publicity stunt. Others called it revolutionary. Marcus stirred beside her. "What time is it?" he mumbled. "Time for us to face the consequences," Victoria said. Showing him her phone, Marcus sat up quickly, scrolling through the messages and videos. "Wow," he said. "This is everywhere." "Are you okay with this?" Victoria asked, suddenly worried. "Your family, your reputation." "Everything is going to change now." Marcus turned to look at her, his eyes serious. "Victoria, I have never been more proud of anyone in my entire life," he said. "What you did last night, the courage it took, the truth you exposed. Yes, it is uncomfortable, Yes, there will be consequences, but they are consequences we should have faced years ago. I am with you, completely. Victoria felt relief wash over her. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The phone rang. It was Bradley, Victoria answered, putting it on speaker so Marcus could hear. Victoria, Marcus. I hope I'm not calling too early, Bradley said, his voice excited. Have you seen the news? We just woke up to it, Victoria replied. It is incredible, Bradley said. People are calling our wedding the wedding that changed everything. Sophia and I have been up all night reading the comments. The stories people are sharing, Victoria. You have started something huge. How is your family handling it? Marcus asked. Bradley paused. Mixed reactions, he admitted. Aunt Patricia left early this morning. She went to her house in the Hamptons. She is not answering calls. A few of the older relatives are angry. They feel betrayed and exposed, but most of the family, especially the younger generation, they are actually relieved. It is, like you said, something we all knew but were too afraid to say. What about the foundation? Victoria asked. That is actually why I am calling, Bradley said. Several of us met this morning. Me, Sophia, Jennifer, Caroline, and a few others. We want to completely restructure the Williams Foundation. Make it transparent, ethical, actually helpful. We want you to be part of that process. Will you help us? Victoria looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, she said, I will help. But there have to be real changes. Not just cosmetic ones, independent audits, community involvement, measurable impact, everything transparent and accountable. Agreed, Bradley said. We are serious about this. You held up a mirror last night, and we did not like what we saw. Now we want to be better. After they hung up, more calls came in. A reporter from the New York Times wanted an interview. A producer from a morning talk show wanted her to appear. Her own company's PR team was fielding media requests. The story was bigger than Victoria had anticipated. Teresa called mid-morning crying, Victoria, I do not know what to say, Teresa said through her tears. My phone has been ringing all morning. People are offering me jobs, offering to help pay for Jasmine's medical school. Strangers are sending money. This is overwhelming. You deserve all of it, Victoria said. Your story, your sacrifice, it touched people. James called me, Teresa continued. He said 3 different investors have reached out about his restaurant. 3. He is in shock, we all are. You changed our lives last night. You changed mine too, Victoria said honestly. You showed me what real courage looks like. Working hard every day despite being treated poorly. Maintaining your dignity when others try to take it away. That is true strength. After the call ended, Victoria sat quietly, processing everything. What had started as a personal mission to expose her in-laws' prejudice had become something much larger. It had sparked a national conversation about class, race, respect, and how society treats service workers. Her assistant called with news that shocked her. Victoria, we have received over 2,000 job applications in the last 3 hours, her assistant said. People who work in service industries want to work for a company that values them. Our website crashed from traffic. This is unprecedented. By afternoon, Victoria and Marcus had to leave their apartment. News crews were gathering outside their building. They went to Victoria's office, where her team had assembled to discuss how to handle the media attention. This could be really good for the brand, her marketing director said. The story aligns perfectly with our values of ethical business and fair treatment of workers. We should lean into it. Or it could backfire, her legal counsel warned. The Williams family could sue for defamation, invasion of privacy, emotional distress. We need to be careful. Victoria listened to both sides, then made her decision. We tell the truth, she said. We do not exaggerate, we do not embellish, but we do not hide either. We stand by everything that happened, and we use this moment to actually make change, not just to benefit our company, but to benefit workers everywhere. She outlined her plan. Her company would establish a fund to support service workers who wanted to start their own businesses. They would partner with organizations fighting for fair wages and worker rights. They would create a certification program for events and businesses that treated their staff ethically. We are not just going to talk about change, Victoria said to her team. We are going to fund it, support it, and make it real. Over the next few days, the story continued to evolve. Patricia released a statement through her lawyer, calling Victoria's actions a betrayal and denying any wrongdoing. But the statement rang hollow given the video evidence and the public tax records Victoria had referenced. Caroline, on the other hand, gave an interview where she openly admitted her own prejudice and apologized. "I was raised in a bubble," Caroline said on camera, tears streaming down her face. "I never questioned how we treated people because that was just normal in my world. But Victoria showed me that my normal was actually cruel. I am ashamed of who I was, and I am committed to becoming better." The interview went viral, with many people praising Caroline's honesty and willingness to change. Richard also made a public apology to James, and the two men were photographed shaking hands outside James's current workplace. Richard announced he would be the first investor in James's restaurant. "I want to support his dream," Richard told reporters, "and I want to make amends for my behavior." The Williams Foundation underwent a complete restructuring. With Victoria's guidance and independent auditors, they fired half the administrative staff who were being paid excessive salaries for minimal work. They redirected funds to actual charitable programs. They brought in community leaders to serve on the board, ensuring that the people they claimed to help actually had a voice in how money was spent. Within 3 months, the foundation had already done more good than it had in the previous 5 years combined. They funded after-school programs, provided scholarships, supported small business development in underserved communities. The transformation was real and measurable. Teresa's daughter Jasmine received a full scholarship for her remaining years of medical school, funded by an anonymous donor that everyone suspected was Victoria, though she never confirmed it. James's restaurant, Grandmother's Table, open to rave reviews, becoming one of the hottest reservations in the city. Maria was hired by Victoria's company as a liaison to their international suppliers. Using her language skills and teaching background, her salary was triple what she had made in catering, and she was able to bring her elderly parents to live with her in America. David retired from catering and became a consultant, teaching companies about respectful workplace culture. His grandchildren were proud to tell people what their grandfather did. 6 months after the wedding, Victoria and Marcus hosted a dinner at their home. They invited Teresa, James, Maria, David, Denise, and their families. They also invited Bradley, Sophia, Caroline, Jennifer, and several other Williams family members who had committed to change. It was a different kind of gathering than the wedding had been. There were no servers. Everyone helped prepare and serve the food. There were no assigned seats based on status. People sat wherever they wanted. Mixed together equals Patricia was not invited. She had not spoken to Marcus in months, and she continued to insist she had done nothing wrong. Some people, Victoria had learned, were too invested in their prejudices to change. But that did not mean everyone had to stay stuck. As they sat around the table sharing food and stories, Victoria looked around at this unlikely family they had created. People from completely different backgrounds, brought together by one night of truth-telling, connected now by genuine friendship and mutual respect. "I want to say something," Teresa said, standing up with her glass raised. "6 months ago I was invisible. Just another worker that rich people did not see, but Victoria saw me. She saw all of us. And she used her privilege and her voice to make other people see us too." She looked at Victoria with tears in her eyes. "You gave us our dignity back, you gave us opportunities, but most importantly, you gave us hope. Hope that things can change, that people can change, that the world can become more fair." Teresa raised her glass higher. "To Victoria, the bravest woman I know, and to all of us, for having the courage to believe in change." To Victoria, everyone echoed. To change, to seeing each other, to treating everyone with dignity. As Victoria clinked glasses with the people around her, she felt a profound sense of peace. The night of the wedding had been terrifying, confrontational and painful, but it had also been necessary. Sometimes you had to tear down old structures before you could build something better. She had gone to that wedding as an invisible server. Dismissed and disrespected, she had left as a catalyst for change. Not perfect, not finished, but definitely in motion, and that, Victoria thought as she smiled at her unlikely family gathered around the table. That was exactly what she had hoped for all along. The end.